Welcome back to the Deep Dive. It's really great to have you with us. Today, we are looking at a stack of documents that, well, I'll be honest with you right off the bat, they're heavy.
Yeah.
And I don't mean heavy in terms of, page count or lots of technical jargon. They carry a very specific kind of emotional and historical weight.
It's the kind of weight that sort of sits in the pit of your stomach. We're not looking at economic spreadsheets today, are we? We're looking at the economy of trust.
The economy of trust, that's exactly it. We often talk about politics in terms of policies, infrastructure, taxes, the kind of boring stuff, right?
Nuts and bolts.
But the source material we have today, it's titled The Mountain's Debt, Gachagua, and the Price of Trust. And it just strips all of that away. It argues that at its core, political power is a transaction. And in 2022, a specific region in Kenya referred to throughout this text as the mountain, well, they signed a very, very high-stakes contract.
And the central premise of this deep dive is what happens when the bill for that contract comes due and the account is empty.
It's a fascinating and, frankly, a little terrifying look at what happens when a community is sold a story, buys it hook, line, and sinker, and then has to watch the entire narrative just crumble around them. So we have a few key missions today. First, we really need to unpack this deal. We have to understand the salesman, a figure named Rigathi Gachagua. Then we need to look at the buyer, the mountain region.
And we have to confront a ghost story that just haunts this entire narrative, a context called Kiambaa.
Exactly. And just to set the stage for you, when the text talks about the mountain, it's referring to the Mount Kenya region. And this is, a massive voting bloc.
Oh, it's huge. Historically, politically, economically, this is a powerhouse.
Yeah.
So when this region shifts, the entire country feels the tremors.
Absolutely. So let's start where the source material starts, with this concept of the salesman. The source introduces Rigathi Gachagua. Now, usually when we analyze political figures, we look at their resume, right? Their policy papers, their technocratic skills.
Star CV.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the text makes a very specific distinction here. It says Gachagua didn't come to the table as a technocrat.
No, not at all. A technocrat sells you a plan. They sell you the future in a PDF file with graphs and projections. They say, if you vote for me, GDP goes up by 2%. It's a very logic-based pitch.
Right.
The source argues that Gachagua's pitch was completely different. He didn't use charts. He used identity.
Identity as currency. That's the phrase from the text that just jumped out at me.
It's such a powerful concept, isn't it? Instead of saying, I know how to fix the roads, he was essentially saying, I know who you are because I am who you are. The text describes him stepping forward not as some theorist, but as a man of the mountain to the mountain.
That little preposition, to, does a lot of heavy lifting there, doesn't it? It implies an insider conversation.
It does. It implies a whisper, almost. It wasn't a broadcast to the entire nation. It was framed as a family meeting. And the source argues that he framed the 2022 election as a binary choice. And this is so crucial for understanding why it worked. He didn't frame it as, policy A versus policy B. He framed it as safety versus danger.
That is primal. I mean, that bypasses the frontal cortex and goes straight to the lizard brain, to the most basic human instinct.
Exactly. When you frame an election as a survival mechanism, you're not really asking for a vote anymore. You're asking people to grab a lifeline you're throwing them.
And the text notes that his authority, it didn't come from his office or his title. It came from that shared identity. He was saying, I am you, and because I am you, I know what threatens us. And because I know what threatens us, you have to listen to me.
It's an incredibly powerful form of persuasion.
There's a specific term the text uses that I really want to drill down on. It talks about the vouch. It says Gachagua didn't just endorse the candidate he was running with, President William Ruto. He vouched for him. He positioned himself as the guarantor.
Think about what that word means, guarantor. In a financial sense, if you and I go to the bank and you want a loan and I sign on as your guarantor, what am I actually doing?
You're taking on all the risk. You're saying to the bank, if he doesn't pay, I will.
Precisely. I am putting my own assets, my own reputation on the line to cover your liability. The source says Gachagua positioned himself as the guarantor of the mountain's protection.
Wow.
He was telling the voters, who were, historically skeptical of outsiders, that this particular candidate was safe. He was saying, trust me, if things go wrong, it's on me.
That is a massive, massive burden to place on your own shoulders. It completely changes the dynamic, doesn't it? It's not just, oh, I think this guy is good.
Yeah.
It's, I am personally ensuring your safety.
And the text makes a really interesting point about how this was received by the people. It says, the mountain didn't interpret his words as an opinion or a suggestion. They received them as instruction.
Instruction. That implies a hierarchy, a kind of deference.
It speaks to the traditional structure of political communication in that region. When a figure establishes that level of identity-based authority, when they position themselves as the son of the soil who is fighting for the family, their analysis becomes a directive.
So it's not a debate anymore.
No. The source describes families debating, churches murmuring, entire villages aligning. It wasn't a casual preference for them. It was a mobilization, a call to arms almost.
And the urgency. That's the other element the text highlights. The message wasn't just vote for us. It was our very survival depends on this.
Right. The text says he framed it as an existential crisis. If we don't do this, we are finished. When you ramp up the stakes to survival, you create a very specific kind of psychological contract. You are binding people to you with their deepest fear.
Which brings us to the second part of this whole drama, the buy. Because the mountain bought what he was selling. And the source really emphasizes that this wasn't just a normal election win. It was a defiance of history.
It was completely unprecedented. I mean, we have to look at the context here. In 2022, you had a sitting president, Uhuru Kenyatta, who was from the mountain.
He was their guy. In the traditional sense, he was their son.
Exactly. And conventional political wisdom, and frankly all of historical precedent, suggests that regions rally around their sons when they're in power. To vote against a sitting president from your own community, that is a shattering of generational patterns.
So why do they do it? The text says it wasn't a rebellion against power itself.
No, and that's a really nuanced point. It wasn't that the region suddenly became anarchist or something. They didn't want to dismantle the system. It was a leap of faith away from it.
A leap of faith away from it.
They left a known protector, the sitting president, for a new promise of protection. And that leap was engineered almost entirely through their trust in Gachagua's judgment.
So they left the guy who was technically theirs because the salesman convinced them that the new guy was actually safer.
As long as the salesman was there to watch him. That's the key.
Okay.
The voters believed that Gachagua would act as a check on the new power. The source says Gachagua had cultivated this reputation as a combative defender.
Combative defender. I like that phrase. It implies someone who isn't afraid to get their hands dirty for you.
Exactly. If you feel like you are under threat, which was the entire narrative being sold, you don't want a diplomat. You don't want a guy who writes polite letters to the editor.
No.
You want a fighter. You want someone who will stand in the doorway and block the danger. And the voters believed that Gachagua, being this combative figure, would never, ever gamble with their survival. They thought, he wouldn't tell us to go this way if it wasn't safe. He's too much of a fighter to let us get hurt.
It's the paradox of the vote, isn't it?
Yeah.
You trust the salesman so much that you ignore your own history. You ignore the fact that you are voting for an outsider because the salesman is there saying, it's okay, I've got the keys, I'll watch the house.
It's a brilliant but incredibly high-risk political maneuver. But the problem with high-risk maneuvers is that when they fail, they don't just fail a little bit. They tend to fail catastrophically.
And that leads us directly into Section 3, buyer's remorse, because the source says the consequences arrived slowly then all at once, which I have to say sounds like a line from a horror movie.
It feels that way to the people on the ground, according to this text. The timeline here is really important. It wasn't instant regret. No, there was a honeymoon period. There was the celebration of the kingmaker status. The mountain felt powerful. They had swung the vote. They were the majority shareholders in this new government.
But then the miscalculation started to show.
Right. The source describes a gradual change in atmosphere. Old certainties dissolved. The alliances that were promised, this idea of a co-presidency or a shared power structure, they began to fracture. Power, as it tends to do, began to consolidate. And it didn't consolidate in the way the mountain expected.
The text mentions that the very figure who was sold as stabilizing, meaning the new leadership, began to appear indifferent or maybe even hostile to the region.
State power started to feel less neutral. Public rhetoric sharpened, security responses grew heavier, and this is where the rubber really meets the road, you see. If you voted for someone because you were promised safety,
Your number one priority.
your number one priority, and then the police response in your area gets heavier, and the rhetoric from the top gets sharper, and you start feeling targeted. You start asking questions. You start looking at that guarantor and asking, hey, where is that protection you promised me?
The source uses a very chilling phrase here. It says, those who celebrated the victory began measuring the cost of silence.
That stopped me in my tracks when I read it. Measuring the cost of silence.
What does that mean to you?
It implies that speaking out has become expensive. It implies fear. In a healthy democracy, you speak your mind. You complain about the government, it's your right. But when you are measuring the cost of that speech, you are calculating risk. You are thinking, if I say this, will I be targeted? Will my business suffer? Will I be safe?
And for a region that was told, we are the owners of this government, to suddenly feel like they have to whisper, that is a massive, massive psychological shift.
It's a complete inversion of the promise. They were promised a voice, they were promised a seat at the head of the table, and instead they're finding themselves, checking under the table for bugs.
So where does this leave Gachagua, the salesman? The text says he's openly attacking the regime now. He's signaling that he recognizes the mistake. He's essentially saying, I see what's happening and I'm fighting it.
He is. He's very vocal. But the source is very critical of this. It says, and I'm quoting here, recognition is not the same as settling the account.
That's a crucial distinction. Just because you admit you were wrong doesn't mean the debt is paid.
Exactly. The trust was the currency. The voters spent that currency based on his advice. You can't just say, oops, my bad, and expect the account to balance. That's like, to go back to our financial analogy, if I vouched for that loan for you and the bank comes to take your house, and I stand on the lawn yelling at the bank manager.
Look at how bad that bank manager is. He's terrible. I'm on your side.
Yeah, right. You might be yelling, but my house is still being repossessed. My life is still ruined. The fact that you are yelling now doesn't change the fact that you signed the paper that got me here. The debt of trust remains outstanding.
And the text argues that Gachagua cannot claim distance from a choice he personally sold. He's trying to pivot to being the opposition from within. But the voters remember who put them in this position in the first place.
He's in a trap of his own making, really. He's trying to lead the defense against a government he helped install. It's a very, very difficult tightrope to walk.
Now, we have to go deeper, because this isn't just about broken campaign promises or, political infighting. The source material warns us that there is a darker, heavier context looming over all of this. We have to talk about the ghost of Kiambaa.
This is section 4, and the text gets very intense here. It says explicitly, Kiambaa is not a metaphor.
And for listeners who might not be familiar with Kenyan history, we really need to explain what Kiambaa represents.
Yeah.
It's a heavy topic.
It is. Kiambaa is a specific place. In the post-election violence of 2007-2008, which was a horrific period in Kenyan history where thousands died and hundreds of thousands were displaced, a church in Kiambaa became the site of a massacre.
A sanctuary.
It was supposed to be. People had fled to the Kenya Assemblies of God, church seeking sanctuary. Men, women, children, the elderly. A mob set the church on fire. People were burned alive inside.
God, it's horrifying to even think about. It's just unimaginable.
It is. It is one of the darkest moments in the nation's history. And the source calls it the fire Kenya refuses to name.
That concept of refusing to name is crucial, isn't it? It points to a deliberate erasure. The text argues that there is no formal reckoning or sustained remembrance for Kiambaa. Why? Why wouldn't you want to remember something so tragic to ensure it never happens again?
Because, as the source puts it, naming it fully would disturb powerful arrangements.
Disturb powerful arrangements. And that sounds like code for it would make the politicians uncomfortable.
It is. That's exactly what it is. Politics in Kenya, and in many places, honestly, is about coalition building. It's about fluidity. The people who were on opposite sides of a conflict yesterday, the people who might have been inciting violence against each other, might be allies today.
Shaking hands and running on a joint ticket.
Exactly. And if you keep bringing up the specific atrocities of the past, if you keep pointing at the scars and asking who did this, you make those current alliances impossible. It's bad for business.
So the silence is strategic.
It is absolute strategy. It's not accidental amnesia. It is a political tool. But the problem, as the text highlights, is that you can scrub the history books, you can avoid talking about it on the news, you can hush it up in Parliament.
The people who live there.
Exactly, the people who lost family members. For them, Kiambaa never ended.
The text says it lives on in inherited fear and unresolved grief.
Inherited fear. Think about that. That means even the generation that didn't experience it directly feels the trauma. It's passed down through stories, through whispers, and this connects directly back to the betrayal of 2022.
How so?
The source says that seeing power rest comfortably with figures associated with that season of violence, it feels like erasure, not reconciliation.
That's a big point. There's a huge difference between reconciliation, which is, facing the truth, and forgiving and erasure, which is just pretending it didn't happen.
Exactly. True reconciliation requires truth. It requires saying, this happened, it was wrong, we acknowledge the pain. Erasure is just, let's move on, let's do business. The mountain feels erased. They see their leaders shaking hands with people they associate, rightly or wrongly, with their deepest trauma, and they are told, get over it. That was the past.
The text has a line that really, really struck me. It says, the lesson learned is that justice depends on political usefulness.
That is a cynical, but I think a powerful observation. If investigating a crime is politically useful, if it hurts your opponent, it happens. If it's politically inconvenient, if it hurts your ally, it stops.
It just stalls.
It stalls. The source mentions that investigations are announced but never conclude. Committees are formed, reports are written, and then nothing. They gather dust on a shelf somewhere.
This teaches the average citizen that the state doesn't care about justice. It cares about leverage.
Which brings us to Section 5, silence as policy, forgetting as strategy. The source argues that this isn't just about Kiambaa, this is the Kenyan playbook. This is how things work.
It describes a pattern. When crimes implicate influence, meaning when the bad guys are powerful, silence becomes the official policy. And when memory threatens stability, forgetting becomes the strategy.
It's gaslighting on a national scale. The script is always the same, you see? Something terrible happens, there's a huge public outcry. The government comes out and says, we are shocked. We will get to the bottom of this.
Right, the performance of outrage.
A committee is formed, time passes, the news cycle moves on, the committee report is delayed, or it's redacted, or it's just shelved. Nothing concludes. Survivors are left alone with their trauma.
The text calls this performing concern without consequence.
It's a performance, it's theater. They hold the press conference, they look sad, they promise action, but it's just to buy time until the public anger fades. And the text says the mountain recognizes this script now. They aren't being fooled anymore.
They see the pattern.
They see the pattern, and they know that delay is not neutrality. It is protection for power.
That is such a heavy realization for a citizen to have. To realize that the delay in your justice isn't just bureaucratic incompetence. It's not that the paperwork got lost. It's a deliberate shield for someone else.
And the source links this silence on the past to the silence on current political harassment. It says it's the same playbook. If the state can be silent about a church being burned down,
With people inside.
yeah, then they can certainly be silent about you getting arrested on trumped-up charges. If they can ignore mass graves, they can ignore your missing neighbor.
It sets a precedent of impunity. The message is, we can do this to you and nothing will happen.
Exactly, and this is why the community under siege narrative is so potent right now. The text describes the current atmosphere in the region. Political gatherings being disrupted, language being informally policed.
It says ordinary citizens are weighing their words carefully. This is anxiety. These are symptoms of unease, not confidence. This isn't what they voted for.
And the source makes a broader point here, which I think is important for everyone, not just people in that region. It says, the idea that one center of power can unsettle an entire region should alarm the whole nation.
Explain that. Why should someone in a different part of Kenya care if the mountain is feeling unsettled?
Because if it can happen to them, it can happen to anyone. The mountain is a politically massive, economically powerful region. If the state can make them feel besieged, if the state can silence their voice, what chance does a smaller, less powerful region have?
It's a canary in the coal mine.
It is. It signals a fundamental shift in the nature of the state itself, from a representative body to a coercive one.
So we have the salesman who sold a defective product. We have the buyer who is suffering the consequences. We have the ghost of the past that was never laid to rest. And now we have the ticking clock. Section 6 of the text focuses on the road to the next election in 2027.
And the clock is ticking very loudly. The source says Gachagua is in a tight spot, which I think is putting it mildly.
He's out there, he's holding press conferences, trying to rally the troops. But the text says that's just. It's not enough.
He owes more than just defiance. That's the line that stands out. You can't just be defiant. You have to be accountable. The requirement is clarity, responsibility, and repair.
How does he do that? I mean, how do you repair a broken trust like this? It seems almost impossible.
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? The text says he cannot wait for the next election cycle. He can't just say, vote for me in 2027 and I'll fix it then. The crisis is now. The community under siege feeling is happening now. People are scared now.
So the source issues an ultimatum of sorts. It says, accountability is the only exit. History is unforgiving to those who recognize harm but hesitate to confront it.
That line hit me hard, too. Recognizing harm isn't enough. It's not enough to stand up and say, I see you are hurting. You have to confront the source of the harm. Even if that source is a government you are technically the second in command of.
Which is an almost impossible position to be in.
It's a political nightmare.
And then there is this warning, and it seems to be for everyone, not just Gachagua. It says, silence today will be remembered as consent tomorrow.
That's a warning to the entire community, to the politicians, but also to the voters. It's saying that if you stay silent while your neighbor is intimidated, you are consenting to a system that will eventually intimidate you. Your turn will come.
It's a call to awareness. The source is saying that we are in a critical window. You cannot stabilize a country through denial. You cannot secure a region through fear.
And it comes back to memory. The text says the mountain remembers the story it was sold, and it remembers who sold it. Memory is the currency here. The politician trades in promises. The voter trades in memory. And right now, the memory is bitter.
Let's just zoom out a bit. We've gone through the whole timeline. The salesman's pitch in 2022, the defiance of the sitting president, the buyer's remorse, the haunting memory of Kiambaa, the strategy of silence, and now this ticking clock. What really stands out to you when you look at this entire arc? What's the core of it?
For me, it's the tragedy of the leap of faith. You know, democracy requires a certain amount of faith. We vote for people we don't know personally. We trust them with our taxes, our schools, our safety. It's an act of faith.
It is, yeah.
But this specific leap-defying your own son to trust an outsider based on the word of a single guarantor was such a massive, unusual psychological investment.
It was a high-stakes gamble. They went all in.
They went all in. They pushed all their chips to the center of the table. And to see that yield regret and silence, that's devastating, not just for this election cycle, but for the concept of political trust itself.
It makes you wonder if they will ever take that kind of leap again.
And that's the real danger, isn't it? When trust is broken this badly, people don't just switch sides to the opposition. Sometimes they just check out entirely. Or they radicalize. They retreat into a kind of hyper-defensiveness.
A bunker mentality.
That's it. The source suggests the region is feeling besieged. That's a bunker mentality. And it's hard to have a healthy, open democracy when a major population bloc feels like they are in a bunker.
And Gachagua is in the bunker with them, but he's also the guy who built the door that locked them in.
That's a perfect analogy. He's trying to lead the defense now, shouting orders, organizing the resistance, but everyone in that bunker looks at him and remembers, wait a minute, you're the one who told us to come in here. You're the one who told us it was safe.
It creates this profound crisis of leadership. Because even if he is right now, even if his current criticisms of the government are 100% valid, his credibility is fundamentally compromised by his past sales pitch.
It's the guarantor problem. Again, if I guaranteed a loan for you that defaulted, you are not going to let me guarantee the next one. Even if I promise I've learned my lesson and I'll be much more careful this time.
The trust is just gone.
It's gone.
So let's wrap this up. The mission of this deep dive was to understand the debt. And I think we found that the debt isn't money. It's not about budgets or projects. It's safety.
It's safety and it's dignity. The text talks about the erasure of Kiambaa. That's a dignity issue. You are denying their pain, their history. And the current intimidation is a safety issue. The debt is the gap between the protection they were promised and the peril they now feel.
And redemption, as the source says, requires more than words.
Redemption, if it comes, will require more than words. That's the quote. You can't speechify your way out of a betrayal of this magnitude. You have to act. You have to demonstrate at a cost to yourself that you are fixing the mess you helped make.
The lingering image for me is definitely the fire. The idea from the text that the fire of Kiambaa is effectively still alive because the ashes are cold but the justice is absent, that is just haunting.
It is. It reminds us that politics isn't a game. We watch the horse race, we look at the polls, we tweet about who is winning and losing, but at the end of the day, it has real-world flesh and blood consequences. When we talk about the mountain, we are talking about millions of people carrying that history, millions of people who just want to be safe in their homes and go about their lives.
So here's the question we want to leave you with today. And it's a tough one. It's the kind of question that doesn't have an easy answer. If a community takes a massive leap of faith based on a promise of protection, and that protection turns into intimidation, is it possible to ever restore that trust?
Or does the breakage permanently alter the political landscape? Does it create a scar that never really heals?
What happens when the salesman admits the product was flawed, but the customer's already paid the price? Can you return a broken government for a refund?
I don't think there's a customer service desk for that.
I don't think so either.
Yeah.
You just have to live with the debt until the next cycle and hope you survive it.
And hope you don't make the same mistake twice.
Exactly. Thank you for diving deep with us today. This was a heavy one, but a really important one. We'll catch you on the next deep dive.
Stay curious.
And stay safe.